By the spring of 2006, the town of Red Creek had mostly moved on from the disappearance of Evan Mills and Jacob Harper, or at least they pretended to. Life carried on, and most of the locals refused to talk about that long, quiet summer of 2002. But in the outskirts of town, near the old Dawson farmhouse, whispers of something strange began to surface. Neighbors reported hearing soft footsteps pacing across the floorboards at night, though no one had lived there for years. Others said they could hear doors creaking open and slamming shut on their own, even in the middle of the night. At first, the sheriff dismissed it as kids messing around or the wind rattling the broken shutters. Then, more unsettling reports began to come in. One elderly neighbor claimed she had woken in the middle of the night to the sound of children laughing. Not playfully, but in a high-pitched, nervous kind of way, almost desperate. She swore the voices called out their own names, Evan, Jacob, repeatedly. On a particularly stormy night, another resident said she saw faint shadows moving behind the boarded up windows, moving slowly as if someone or something was watching her. Every time someone investigated, the house appeared empty, untouched, as if it hadn't been entered in years. Yet the sounds persisted, growing louder, more frantic, as if begging to be noticed. The strangest complaint came from a young mother living across the street. She said she had been walking her dog at dusk when she saw a figure in the upstairs window of the Dawson farmhouse. A child standing perfectly still, staring straight at her. The figure didn't move for several minutes, and when she blinked, it had vanished. That same night, she claimed to hear a faint voice pleading, "Please, somebody help us," echoing from the house. Even the sheriff, who had been involved in dozens of missing person cases, admitted later that he couldn't explain the intensity of the fear that seemed to radiate from the farmhouse. Something about the place felt alive, and it was watching. Sheriff Owens finally decided it was time to investigate the Dawson farmhouse himself. The structure had been abandoned for years, and nature had begun reclaiming it. Vines clinging to the walls, broken windows rattling in the wind, and the wooden porch creaking under even the lightest step. As he and his small team stepped inside, the air hit them first stale, damp, and metallic, like something long forgotten had been rotting in the shadows. Dust motes floated in the weak streams of sunlight, cutting through the cracked windows, giving the entire interior a ghostly haze. Every step seemed louder than the last, echoing through empty rooms filled with broken furniture and peeling wallpaper. The house felt alive in a way that made the officer's skin crawl. As they cautiously explored the ground floor, a series of strange scratch marks on the wooden floorboards caught their attention. They were deep, uneven, as if something heavy had been dragged repeatedly across the floor for months, maybe years. The team followed the marks into what had once been the kitchen. Under layers of rotting linoleum, the scratches converged on a faint outline of a trapdoor. The outline was almost imperceptible, hidden in plain sight, but there was no mistaking the edges. Sheriff Owens knelt and ran his fingers along the seams. The wood felt strangely warm despite the cold, as though the house itself was warning them not to open it. After several minutes of prying and careful inspection, they managed to lift the trapdoor. A rush of cold, damp air erupted from the opening, carrying with it a smell that made everyone instinctively recoil, a mixture of mold, rust, and something else they couldn't name, something faintly human. The darkness below seemed bottomless at first glance, a black void that swallowed the beam of their flashlights immediately. Peering over the edge, the officers could just make out the outlines of a narrow staircase leading downward. The tension was suffocating. Every officer could feel the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. None spoke, each silently acknowledging the unspoken question. What had been hidden down here for 4 long years? As the officers descended the narrow staircase, the air grew colder, heavier, almost suffocating. The beam from their flashlights cut through the darkness in short, shaky arcs, revealing walls covered in rusted pipes, tangled electrical wires, and dark stains that seemed to shift when caught in the light. The tunnel was far larger and more elaborate than anyone expected. Whoever built this place had done so with purpose. Every corner, every junction felt deliberate. It wasn't just a basement, it was a hidden labyrinth, winding deeper underground. And the further they went, the more oppressive the silence became, broken only by the occasional drip of water echoing through the passage. Along the walls, the officers began to notice strange etchings and symbols carved crudely into the concrete. Some looked like letters, others like twisted faces, each scratched in haste yet with an unsettling precision. The air smelled faintly metallic, mixed with something that reminded them of decayed wood and unwashed clothing. Every step seemed to amplify the tension. Shadows stretched and warped, dancing across the walls like phantoms. At times, the officers could swear they saw small, fleeting movements at the edges of their vision. A shift in the darkness that disappeared whenever they tried to focus on it. Whispers seemed to brush past their ears, though when they paused to listen, the tunnel was silent again. After what felt like hours winding through the maze, the team stumbled upon a small room tucked off to one side. The doorway was almost hidden, partially covered by fallen debris and dust. Inside, a single light bulb flickered weakly from the ceiling, swaying slightly as if disturbed by a breeze. But there was no wind. On a rickety chair in the corner, 2 sets of children's clothes were neatly folded, as if someone had carefully placed them there waiting. The room smelled faintly of damp earth, mixed with something sharper, something metallic. The officers froze, their flashlights trembling slightly in their hands. It was a room intentionally left as a marker, a signal that something, or someone, had been here recently, leaving a message that they weren't ready to understand yet. At the end of the twisting tunnel, the officers encountered a heavy metal door, unlike anything they had expected in a farmhouse basement. It was solid, cold to the touch, and bore the marks of rust and neglect. But there was something deeply unsettling about it. The door was locked from the outside, the mechanism old yet intact, as if someone had deliberately sealed whatever lay beyond for years. The sound of their keys and crowbars against the metal echoed through the tunnel, a harsh, metallic clang that seemed far too loud in the oppressive silence. Every officer in the group felt it, a strange, prickling tension crawling across their skin, like the room itself was watching their every move. When the lock finally gave way, the door creaked open to reveal a room that made their stomachs twist. The walls were covered in hundreds of drawings, pinned haphazardly with rusty nails. At first glance, the sketches seemed childlike, innocent even. But as the officers' eyes adjusted, they realized the content was anything but innocent. Drawings of 2 boys running, crying, and looking over their shoulders in terror filled the walls. In some, the boys were surrounded by dark, shadowy figures, their faces hidden, looming over them. One sketch even depicted the old mill road where Evan and Jacob had been last seen, but the figures watching from the trees were impossible to identify, part human, part something else. In the far corner of the room, the officers noticed a small, battered tape recorder sitting atop a dusty crate. Despite the years of neglect, it was surprisingly intact. One officer pressed play, and a raspy, trembling voice filled the room. "They're safe for now." Then a second voice, weak and childlike, whispered so softly it made the hair on the back of their necks stand on end. "Don't open the door." The room seemed to close in on them, every sound amplified, every shadow alive. The atmosphere was so thick with tension that breathing felt like a challenge, and the officers could feel their own hearts beating in sync with the faint flicker of the single light bulb overhead. It was clear that whatever had happened here, it had been carefully orchestrated, and the boys, or what remained of their world, were trapped within the darkness. The officers hesitated at the threshold of the metal door, the tape recorder's final whispers still echoing in the room behind them. Every instinct screamed to stop, but curiosity, mixed with duty, pushed them forward. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the cold, concrete floor that seemed to stretch endlessly beyond the doorway. Then, faint footsteps began to echo from somewhere deep within the darkness, slow and deliberate, each step sending a shiver down their spines. The sound wasn't human, not entirely. It carried a hollow resonance, like something enormous dragging itself toward them. And yet it was undeniably measured, purposeful, and terrifyingly close. As they strained their eyes, trying to make out shapes in the darkness, movement appeared. At first, it was just a shadow flickering at the edge of their vision, vanishing whenever they tried to focus on it. Then two figures emerged, small and hunched, moving awkwardly, but with an eerie, almost mechanical precision. The officers' hearts pounded as their flashlights illuminated Evan and Jacob, the boys who had disappeared 4 years ago. But they weren't the same. Their faces were pale, almost translucent under the weak light, eyes wide and blank, staring straight ahead without recognition or emotion. Their clothes hung loosely on their thin frames, tattered and stained, yet they moved as if guided by someone or something else. Before anyone could speak, a cold, unnatural wind swept through the tunnel, carrying with it a faint whisper, barely audible but unmistakably human. "He's still down here." The words seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, filling the room with dread. The boys froze in place, their heads tilting slightly in unison, as if acknowledging a presence no one else could see. The officers could feel the air thicken, like the darkness itself had weight. Shadows stretched along the walls, twisting into grotesque forms that didn't belong to anything living. Every instinct screamed to leave, but stepping back was impossible. The tunnel seemed to have a grip on them, pulling them deeper into the unknown. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any noise, heavy and oppressive, as if the house itself were waiting for their next move. Before the officers could react, a loud metallic clang echoed from deeper within the tunnel, as if something enormous had slammed against the walls. Evan and Jacob's blank eyes turned slowly toward the shadows, and for the first time, a faint, unnatural smile crept across their pale faces. The air grew colder, heavier, and the whispers returned, louder this time, forming words that sent shivers down every spine. "You shouldn't have come here." Suddenly, the boys stepped back into the darkness, vanishing as if swallowed by the tunnel itself. The officers shone their lights frantically, but the room was empty again, leaving only the rusted drawings, the flickering bulb, and the hollow echo of footsteps that weren't theirs. They realized, with a creeping dread, that the boys had returned, but something else had followed them. Something that was still down there, waiting, patient, and hungry. Sheriff Owens turned to leave, but the whispers seemed to follow them up the stairs, echoing through the empty farmhouse long after they had gone. Outside, the night was calm, quiet, almost too quiet. And somewhere deep beneath Red Creek, the metal door waited silently for the next curious soul, brave or foolish enough to open it.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.